If you're scooping ice cream and you're understanding the sales cycle of ice cream vending and you're understanding what the marketing is like for your ice cream shop, things like that that don't seem a big deal, you can translate those into very meaningful insights.
Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 25th episode, we'll talk with Ginny Marvin, who's the paid media reporter for Search Engine Land and Marketing Land. If you have any interest in following the developments in paid media, you've probably come across the articles written by Ginny. I know that I have personally learned about several new Google products, advertising trends, and much more from her columns. But it didn't always start that way. As a longtime reader of Ginny's columns, I was really curious on how she found this career path, the move she made along the way to become a voice in the world of paid search and paid media, and then also what advice she has for others looking to have their voice heard as well. As fate would have it, Ginny and I were both selected to be faculty at the latest version of the Marketing Profs University, and after we got done recording our teachings, I reached out to her to see if she might want to be a podcast guest. She said yes, and not only that, she also shared that she's a fan of the podcast. So this episode is based on mutual admiration, curiosity, and a love for all things paid media. It's also a chance to hear two of the recently voted top 25 most influential experts in PPC talk about their craft. Now that's a mouthful, but we were both given that honor for the 2016 year just earlier this week at the PPC Hero blog. All right, so we're about to get to Ginny, but before we get started, I wanted to share a sponsor message. The PPC course by Jeffalytics, who is yours truly, is a great way to learn paid search marketing with Google AdWords from the ground up. Learn Google AdWords through HD videos that teach you how to establish things like your search budget, revenue models, lead generation models for agencies, and the secret to acing the certification test. Visit ppccourse.com to learn more. And on to Ginny Marvin. For show notes, visit jeffalytics.com/Ginny. Okay, well, we're here today with Ginny Marvin. Ginny, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited. As we were talking about before the call, I'm really excited to hear your story, and so I figured we'd get right into it. And so my first question for you is, what made you get excited about marketing? What made you realize this is maybe a career path for you?
Yeah, well, so I actually started shortly after college. I wanted to be a book editor. So I actually interned during college for a literary agency and interned a bit after for a publisher. And both of those organizations told me, you've got to take this publishing course it was at Radcliffe at the time. It's now at Columbia. And it's a summer course, and it's 6 weeks long. And the first half is all about book publishing, and the second half is all about magazine publishing. And experts in the field come in and talk about what their jobs are like. You're doing hands-on projects, coming up with book ideas to publish, finding the authors, all this stuff. So the first half was books. And as soon as the magazine portion started, I thought, oh my gosh, this is more like it. This speed is more like it. I mean, how long it takes to publish one book. Mm-hmm. The idea of being able to put out a magazine, weekly, monthly, whatever, just instantly appealed to me. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest sort of epiphany moments for me is one of the assignments putting a circulation testing plan together, so the direct mail testing. And everyone, I think, will still be familiar with direct mail.
Yes.
So back then, that was the main acquisition mechanism for magazines. It was direct mail testing. And so in putting this program together, we used Excel, and I had never seen Excel. I'd never, the whole thing completely blew my mind. And I was just completely obsessed with this new spreadsheet program, which sounds so nerdy right now, but it completely changed my mind. And my approach to math, I was one of those people that wasn't not terrible at math, but one of those people who got bored quickly with doing long work out problems, and to be able to just plug in formulas and get answers quickly and accurately in Excel was just this huge epiphany. So that 6 weeks totally changed the trajectory of where I wanted to go. So I went from wanting to be a book editor to I knew I just wanted to be on what I called the business side of magazines. Direct mail, circulation, marketing, marketing for ad sales, all that side just instantly appealed to me. So I went out on the job market and ended up being the assistant to the publisher at a magazine publishing company in Boston. And the publisher ended up being one of those, prize mentors that you just feel so lucky looking back to have had on your life. Mm-hmm. So because she was a great mentor, she let me kind of push the envelope. She pushed me to try new things and just sort of threw me in. And what the focus was really, besides doing her, sort of executive assistance projects, was working on more and more the marketing for ad sales. And that was everything from writing ad copy, not ad copy, but promotional copy, helping to figure out ad packages, things like that. And from there, I just kind of got more and more into the marketing side, and then ended up being the marketing director a few years later at that magazine. And when she left, another publisher came on, and I had another fantastic mentor who also was very steeped in direct mail and understood and taught me so much about writing and persuasive copy, and that has then flows so nicely into paid search and everything else sort of marketing related. It was just such a great foundation.
Wow, that's really cool. So basically you had the affinity for this thing because of this school, but then the job itself that you first got was just more of like a foot in the door, or just like an opportunity to try whatever you could. But it is really that curiosity plus a mentor who is like, hey, let's get you to where you want to be, and let's get you there. And so they sort of showed you the ropes and taught you the way that it works for them. And that it's interesting to me that's it's cool that's how it went, but also it seems like a lot of the skills they were teaching you are so valuable for the world of search that I know you from. So it's sort of cool how you were around direct response marketers, and they taught you all the different aspects of how do we get a new customer, how do we get many new customers, and how do we test what we're doing here.
Right. It's the fundamentals of marketing that don't necessarily change as our tools and platforms change, obviously. And a lot, which is exciting. But to a great extent, marketing is marketing. and the fundamentals, once you have those down, that's when it gets really fun.
Mm-hmm. So what would a day in your life have been like back then? I know it might be too long to think about it, but was it just seeing how tests went? Was it writing copy? Was it a little bit of everything? Did you have a big team? How did all that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we were part of a bigger publishing company, and we were the only office or magazine that was based in Boston. Once we got acquired by a company that was based in Los Angeles and had offices in LA and New York. So depending on what the structure was like, sometimes we had great reliance and could rely heavily on corporate marketing. Other times, a lot of it was just driven straight in-house. I guess looking back, as a marketing director there, I had a small team, and we did everything from all the media kits that you used to, advertiser would call in, or a salesperson would call an advertiser and say, this is what our magazine is. This is the audience. It was, a lot about audience targeting and selling an audience. So, doing all the sales promotional pieces for those media kits, and that'd be everything from, general audience metrics to very targeted sheets based on the advertiser's market. So all of that, working with graphic designers, doing a lot of graphic design on my own. And then we also had a trade show piece that we would go and exhibit at trade shows. We had a trade show manager, and she and I would work on, designing a new booth and all of that kind of stuff, shipping goodie bags and all those kind of events details that I now am so rusty at, but it was a big part of life back then. And then, being there to support whatever ad sales needed, what objections are advertisers coming to them with, and how can we address that? Do we need more research? Do we need, whatever it is, how can we help address their needs? So,
yeah.
And working with,
so it sounds like,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it sounds like more than just like what you might do in a role as like a PPC person or, a specialist. It's sort of like everything.
Yes.
Like we need you to do everything we can in order to make this thing float. We need hands-on.
Exactly.
We just need doers to get this stuff going.
Exactly. Yeah, and oftentimes it was, talking to circulation. What are they doing on the newsstand? How are newsstand sales going? Or are we going to be able to tell advertisers that that the magazine's being featured, especially in airports, the next issue, and that can help sell ad space, and talking to editorial and saying, what do you have planned for upcoming issues? It would be really special, and how could advertisers, without crossing that boundary, tie in on that? And so, yes, it was very, I guess you want to call it multi-channel. And then this was early, so then the website started coming on, and then that came into play. And it was largely at that time there were a lot of questions on, well, do we put up all of our content on the website? Do we have paywalls? Do we just have teaser copy? And what do we do as far as advertising? Are advertisers going to pay for, back then it was just banner ads, are they going to pay for banner ads? Are they going to have we actually did do some like sponsored sections on the website, things like that. Or is this added value? All those kinds of questions were starting to come up. And that was sort of my first exposure to web marketing.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like you basically had the like a 360 view of the entire business, which is really interesting because not a lot of companies allow that within their marketing department or have a small enough team to do that.
Yeah, and I knew I loved the marketing side. Sort of had ideas for where that could go, but like you said, I had been toying with going to business school at that time and thought, this is a pretty great situation I have right here. Let's see how this plays out and go from there.
Yeah, the on-the-job MBA, that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And how it played out was the entire company got sold to another bigger company, and they said, "Come move to New York." And my husband and I had just moved to Maine, and I said, I'm not going to do that. So I parted ways with them and dabbled a little bit longer in publishing, and then realized, all right, I am not in New York, and even if I were, I'm not sure I would stay in publishing at this point. So I figured, let's go digital and see what makes sense there. And so I started kind of just teaching myself, just researching what area could I get into that is interesting, growing, and so I just started reading about search engine optimization, and knew very little about it other than tiny bit from publishing days, and said, "Oh, this is fascinating. I'm going to see how I can get into this." So I just started kind of reaching out to. There were a few local agencies in Portland, and sent my resume out. Didn't hear one word back from anyone. Oh, well, I might have to do this on my own. And then finally got a call from a woman who said, "I do not understand why you sent your resume to us. You're a marketing director, and this is for an entry-level, SEO contractor. Why would you do this?" Well, she said, "You're too experienced." I said, "Well, I'm definitely not too experienced in SEO, and I'm heartily believe that a giant step back can lead to a huge step forward." So I was totally happy to get off one track and hop to another one.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing. I started doing SEO contracting.
Interesting. That's sort of, I mean, I can definitely see, I think I've had that conversation before with people who applied for positions at my agency, just like, hey, you sound great, but you seem too experienced. What gives? And so it's an interesting thing, but I think what way you put it is great, and that is it's never too late in a career, too early to try switching to something if you think that's what the future is going to be.
Right, exactly. And I felt comfortable enough that I had a marketing background that made sense. And back then, so this was 2005, and pretty much everyone coming into SEO either came to it from webmaster, the webmaster side, or they got there from the marketing side. And so I obviously was coming to it from the marketing side. It felt a little bit lopsided toward the webmaster side, but I felt like, I had a tiny bit of, I understood HTML at that point, which was helpful as well. But I felt like I had those fundamentals to be able to see how SEO fit into the, bigger marketing plans strategies. So it was a small startup, and she suddenly gotten, I don't know, there was like 3 people maybe. And one of those, got a couple of big accounts and suddenly was like, oh my God, we need help now. And so I quickly went from doing contract to being full-time to then taking over paid search. And then, the agency kept growing, and then I ended up being vice president and managed all the day-to-day operations for both paid search, SEO, analytics.
Wow, that's quite the change, or that's quite the ascent, I guess you could say, from not knowing it, or knowing that you wanted to get into it, but maybe not having the chops that you thought that you might have or that you might need, to now the vice president for overseeing everything within about 2 years. That's really impressive.
Yeah, but I think, in that we figured out how to hire, because still, and I mean, it's changed somewhat today, but, most people coming out of college and are not skilled paid search managers, right? I mean, they, SEO, they're not skilled in either, typically. So, and they certainly were not back then, and even trying to find, didn't matter how old they were. There was very hard to find people with any sort of search background at all. And so hiring became, all right, we need to find really smart, really driven, really curious people who are going to get the underlying marketing fundamentals of how search fits into their business strategies. And so we got really lucky and found fantastic people, and were able to kind of pass on the way that we had learned and try, institute training. But also, we were all still, everything changes so quickly, and especially back then, everyone's still learning on the job, which makes it fun.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. I mean, everybody's learning, everybody's trying something new, and with that, you can, I think if you can understand the needs of the business, and the needs of the customer,
right,
which is ultimately just to find more people who are interested in what you have to say, and figuring out what to say to them. The sooner you can do that in a new industry, you don't have to go through a lot of the processes that you might have had to in a traditional one, where you go through several different layers and different rings before you can become a VP or become that level. You can just sort of, just because you've done it and you're the one who's done it the longest,
right,
you can get into those positions a lot more quickly.
Right. And, and I had management experience, and I think, all that kind of plays in, but exactly. It was also, to some extent, right place, right time. And back then, and it's changed somewhat, but, there's still a lot of need to educate clients that search is a piece of their marketing efforts, because sometimes as an agency, it's hard to make sure you're getting a seat at the table, and that the clients are thinking of you when they are, for example, planning trade shows, or going to be releasing new products, or have sent out they're running TV campaigns, whatever it is, getting that all plan together and making them realize that all of that stuff is going to have an impact on what they're doing online was also, such a interesting education process that I really enjoyed working with clients on that part. Like, okay, you're thinking that paid search is just these campaigns, but it's really supporting and can underpin so much else of what you're doing in email and events and any other advertising channels. It's just all kind of comes around full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that phase myself when it was, right around the same time you were doing this. It was all about convincing people that search mattered and that it was important and that it needed to be part of their marketing mix, because it was either so new or so unknown, or they just didn't have the expertise. That a lot of the time it was just like, let's not forget about search. It's so important to everything we're doing here. And I think that, probably now as we record this, search has pretty much arrived and is saturated to a certain point, and people know what it is. But back then, you had to really do a lot of time educating and convincing and getting people to even know that this is there.
Exactly. And then even when you did have them on board, I remember we'd run reports, monthly reports or weekly reports, whatever it was, and you'd see some spike somewhere and think, we did nothing different on our end, and call the client, oh yeah, we had this big email campaign, or we had, whatever it was. Oh yeah, if you told us that, see how all of this comes together, it all impacts one another. And so there may have been other ways that we could have leveraged this even further. But, being able to show, that was the other thing I just loved about search generally, is being able to show results so quickly and being able to test things really quickly and show connections.
Yeah, like immediately, right? You can get the responses you want right away.
Yeah.
Great. So how did that? So you were in the agency providing search marketing. How long did that continue on for? What did you decide to do after that?
So that my timing gets a little fuzzy. I had 2 children during that time, and so I think. So that agency was sold, and I went with the new agency, and that was actually super interesting. It was a digital marketing agency that didn't have search, and so they brought us in to plug that hole. But it was also a sister agency of a general branding, offline branding agency. So once our piece came into play, it was really sort of a full services agency, and we suddenly had more control and more capabilities. So we could have things like landing page design influence, and how websites were created, because you get so hamstrung by not being able to create great landing pages for clients who just refuse to get the need for landing pages that convert. So I stayed on there to kind of facilitate that transition for a bit. And then I did an in-house stint that was really, really interesting, great learning experience, very poor cultural fit for me. So I think I stayed there, and I was primarily doing paid search there and managing SEO staff. But I stayed there for, I think, just under a year, and then left and started doing consulting on my own. So I did that off and on for, I don't know, maybe a couple more years. And then I don't know if you want to get into the search engine land connection now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dying to hear that actually. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah. So this is another, just say yes and see what happens. So Monica Wright, she's the VP of, I'm going to get this wrong, audience development, I believe, for Third Door Media, which is parent company for Search Engine Land and Marketing Land and Search Marketing Expos. And she and I have worked together off and on for years and years. I actually hired her back in the early days of the agency to do SEO. And she was working at Third Door and said, they're looking for somebody to write about paid search. would you like to do it? And I thought, wow, that is okay. Okay. I said, but I need to, talk to, so I said, let's do this on a trial basis because this could be really terrible for everyone involved. So I, talked to Danny Sullivan and I talked to Matt McGee, as editor-in-chief, and said, let's just try this and see how it goes. I may not like it and you may really not like it. So that was in February of 2013, I guess. And whatever it was, weeks later, Enhanced Campaigns was announced. And so I really basically just got completely thrown into to this, the biggest change that's ever happened in AdWords. And so I think I started, anyway, it worked out. And they asked me to come on full time, and I started full time in April of 2013. So, yeah.
Wow.
And at that point, I was writing largely for search engine land, focusing almost exclusively on paid search. And probably, I don't know, 6 months in, started writing more and more for marketing land, covering analytics and display, video, paid social.
Yeah, just sort of covering the whole thing. Yeah. Interesting. So that's sort of where my introduction to you comes from, is that, whenever I mean, I obviously read Search Engine Land. I've been reading it forever. And every time that something new breaks out, it's you who breaks the news. And you know what I mean? Like, you become my source for when things come out, or when I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool. I noticed something on a Google blog or something comes out. You've written about it already, or you're on your way to doing that. So it's really sort of cool. And you say, you had the trial to see if it worked out. It seems like it's working out pretty well as far as being able to keep up to date with everything that's going on.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think it has worked out. And it's still nerve-wracking. I mean, you still want to, it's always stressful. Or at least I feel a lot of pressure to make sure I get things right, get things relatively thoroughly. Am I asking all the questions that a marketer would ask about this new thing? If I go to use it, am I going to know how? All those kinds of questions that obviously coming at this from a practitioner's viewpoint is invaluable. So I think, sometimes there are things that come out and there's just no real time to give a full, I really would like to think more about this before I need to hit publish. But, there's usually time after to go back and say, okay, let's look at this. Let's talk to, some other practitioners. Let's see what they're saying. How are people thinking about using this? So, it's kind of striking that balance of... And then, there are other things that are not breaking. It's just me thinking about something. And, am I the only one thinking about this? Will anyone read this? Am I going to work on this forever and then it's of interest to two other people?
Yep. Yeah, no, I can imagine that. Yeah, you have like there's different levels of pieces that you need to do. And I'm guessing that you can start working on a certain one that's more of a deep dive into something, and then news breaks. And everything stops. Like, you probably, even in the middle of this podcast, if something came across your screen, you'd probably be like, "Hey Jeff, I got to go." I don't know if you heard this, but Google announced something. Is that a reality, or is that sort of like is that type of thing happen to you ever? Do you feel like you're on call all the time? With these things?
It can feel like that. I mean, luckily we're at a size now where there is sort of backup, but. Yes, there's definitely times when you're working on something and then, oh, yes, Google is, breaking this news right now, or, Bing is doing this, and whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, there is sort of that needing to be on, but we've gotten pretty good about making sure that we don't have to be on all the time and communicate with each other pretty well. So I can now, take vacation and know that somebody can handle whatever it is that comes up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And do you seek out the story ideas, or do they come to you at this point, or is it a little bit of both?
It's definitely a bit of both. So sometimes the companies will come and say, we're releasing this. Here's a heads up, and we're going to announce it tomorrow. And you may have time for, asking questions back and forth for more clarification on something.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it's, bam, blog post is up, or whatever it is that, however the news breaks, it's out there. Other times, you'll kind of happen on something, or readers will send us things like the test I just wrote about yesterday, where instead of rating stars, Google's testing showing percentage of positive reviews. That came from a reader in the UK who noticed that. So yeah. So it really it runs the gamut.
Interesting. And so you just sort of have at that point, is just whatever we can get out there that we have a thorough enough story or that sounds interesting to our audience, and then you can start to test what types of stories work and which ones don't, I guess.
Right. And the test, well, it's always funny because the things that I think are not that interesting are the things that blow up, and the things that I think are, really that I'd love to spend tons of time on, no one cares. But,
yep.
I think that's in any sort of publishing market that happens. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's where, the things that take not 30 seconds, but 30 minutes to write will often be the popular things on the site, and something that you've spent a lot of time researching and working on doesn't get that kind of traction. So
yeah, but it might have a bigger long-term impact too for the ones who it does.
It's true.
Help and who do need
yeah,
it.
and not to downplay, a lot of what I do is not necessarily for big page view spikes. Most of what I do is not for big page view spikes. It's for what is important for readers to know, or to be thinking about, as things are evolving in whichever space I'm writing about, and that's one thing that's really refreshing about Third Door is it's not the focus is on the audience, not individual articles driving page views.
Yep.
So it's because we're here to serve the audience, and that's what makes the best business sense as well.
Well, I would say that thinking about it from that perspective, and also just since a lot of it is search and marketing related, I think that there is there's content that does drive people in the door, and then there's content that maybe it's a little bit longer form, doesn't get a lot of tweets or anything like that, but it gets search traffic for years to come.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that the things that you spend more time on, the think pieces, are the ones who are going to be driving more of that type of traffic. So it might not have the immediate payoff, but it might have the biggest long-term payoff. I know that happens with a lot of bloggers, and it's that they think that the headline that gets the most tweets is the most important one, but then there's something they wrote 3 years ago that just continues to drive traffic, a significant amount of traffic.
Right. No, it's so true. I was sort of digging into analytics a few days ago, and just looking at, because we've done a bunch of these kind of primers, MarTech primers on marketing land. What is programmatic ad buying? What's a data management platform? What's an ad exchange? Those kinds of things. And I thought, how are those doing? And what is programmatic ad buying primer? When it was first published, it got people were interested, but it is one of those, evergreen pieces that has continually, every day since it's been published, has gotten, decent page views every day. And so it was like, oh, good, that was worth it, because that was another one of those things I thought, there's a lot of pieces about what is programmatic, but I want to do something that is, that hopefully will be sort of a one-stop shop for people.
Yep.
So that's always, you're right, because it is always satisfying to be like, okay, yes, there are the people that need to care about this are actually finding it and coming. So that's rewarding.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly what you hope for, and that's actually part of what what SEO ultimately becomes and just marketing in general, right? You have
Exactly.
different layers of content, different things you do, and it reaches people at different points.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all useful, and actually, just anybody listening, that's a lesson here is you can't get too focused on short-term things because they don't always have the same long-term impact. So it's a mix of these things. It's really just you have to have a certain amount of just content and things for people to find in general if you want to build a brand that's worth following and that's worth looking at. And so those might be the things
Yep.
that's an investment in the long term versus the short term.
Exactly. Yep.
So I have one question I have for you, and is really around the writing aspect of this. So it's obvious to marketers that writing is important and what we call content, just having content out there, just like what we talked about, at the right place, right time, that type of stuff is very important. But I think that a lot of people are afraid that they're not the ones to deliver that. They're not the ones to write it. And so did you have any struggles with that area, or was your magazine training enough to get you into this part of being a writer? Was that always part of the job, or did that become part of the job?
Well, what was part of the job was, so yeah, I guess the magazine backdrop, that was promotional copy. And so, I mean, sometimes it would be a house ad in the magazine, but for the most part, you know, a lot of other people had seen it. I had a lot of people proofread it, be able to give feedback, and it wasn't going to live out in the ether forever. So coming to Third Door, no, it was not natural, and it was. So I completely empathize with the nerves and sort of apprehension people have of not wanting to put their words out there. But at the same time, it's been so rewarding. And I think, the way I approach it is as a teaching mechanism for myself first.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm learning and I feel like I'm able to articulate something in a way that I've been able to work through something, then I feel like I'm doing a service, I guess, if that makes any sense. And so I look at it really, am I teaching myself first? And if I am, then I'm probably doing a pretty good job at being able to teach others. And by no means am I going to be saying I'm the best teacher. And what I love is when people say, oh, and then did you also think about this? No, I didn't. Wow, that's so fascinating. That's why this community is so fun, is that people love to talk about ideas and share ideas and try new things. And so that feedback loop is so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big part of it, is that when it comes down to it, we think we know what we're doing. We might have the experience in the field. We might be doing these things, but then trying to explain it to somebody else in a way that they can understand, or knowing that there might not be enough talented people coming out of college knowing search marketing or whatever, like you talked about. Teaching them what you know makes you smarter at the same time. It makes it so that it strengthens your knowledge, and it lets you think about it from a perspective that maybe you don't think about it day to day when you're in the field working on things, because you don't get to look at it from a 10,000 feet perspective. And I'm guessing that writing is very similar.
Yes, exactly. No, it is so helpful. And I mean, I guess I would, if people are feeling apprehensive about writing and putting it out there, I would highly recommend just starting writing in Word for yourself, and then coming back to it the next day, and rereading it and saying, okay, yes, this is great. I did a great job. Or more likely, you're going to say, oh, I'd like to tweak this here and there, and really work at it and get more comfortable with it. Yep. And not that you necessarily, feel like you're hitting it out of the park every single time. That's not going to happen. But, you'll get more confident and find your voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I responded to a Quora thread one time, and somebody said, am I too late to start blogging? And I said, here's what you should do. You should create a blog spot with a generic name on there and write 100 blog posts. And then once you get to your 100th post, delete it and then start your real blog.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really what you should do is just get that experience, however it is. It can be anonymous, but you need to write. Like, the only way to get better at writing is to write. It's not to wait until the time is
Yes.
perfect. It's to start now. And actually, the sooner you do it, the more quickly you can get to the point where you're good at it, or that it opens up doors passively. I mean, that's how you can get
Right.
your introduction to people. That's how it precedes you, really. It scales much better than going to a networking event or handshaking, things like that. I mean, writing can do a lot for you even when you're not actively working on it.
Absolutely. And also, what's interesting is when you start writing for yourself, you'll start reading differently. You'll start reading other people's content and blog posts differently as well. And you'll see sort of the process behind the scenes. And I would also just say, reach out to those other writers and ask them questions and say, or I liked this piece, and get engaged that way too, because again, this community is open and people will respond. So
Yeah.
I would highly recommend reaching out.
Absolutely. I think that's a big opportunity, is that this is a very giving community who's willing to give back and to grow the greater good. And so don't be afraid to utilize it.
Right. Yeah, and on that same token, I'm on the conference and speaking side. So I run a lot of the panels at the Search Marketing Expo, SMX, and it's the same thing. I love people who come up and say, "I want to start speaking. Can you help me?"
Mm-hmm.
and I will, once you show somebody the interest and drive that you want to do something and you're willing to learn, then and be receptive to feedback, you're gonna get great results. And so that's one of my favorite things to do is work with new speakers and help them with their decks and help them with their pitches and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's another avenue that can be great for making a network.
Absolutely. I think that, they can go hand in hand as well. And that is just getting the experience in either of these things. Because your first speech, you're not going to be very good. Your first article, you're not going to be very good. That's just how it goes, right? And so it's all about surrounding yourself with people who can help you out, and then being dedicated to incorporating that feedback, because it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear feedback that is not anything but you were perfect. But I guess most of us should realize we're not perfect starting up. So
Right.
hearing
Right.
hard things and then
Exactly.
doing something about it is a way that we can all progress in what we do.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, great. So it's cool to hear how this all came together and how it came about. And obviously,
Not a straight line.
yeah, not at
a
all.
straight line.
Yeah, it's sort of like you have to be willing to reinvent yourself and be willing to sort of suck it up while you're pursuing something new that maybe you were expert in one area, but now you want to gain more expertise. But I think that
Right.
obviously,
And take chances.
yeah,
Take chances.
yeah, it
Yep.
seems like it was the right move to do
Yeah.
along the way, though.
I think so.
Do you have any advice for the future upcoming marketers, people who are looking to maybe take the leap into what they're doing, or any advice you want to give them?
Yeah, so if you're in college or recent graduate, I would highly recommend interning. And even if it's not at it doesn't need to be in an agency, or it doesn't need to be specifically in a, creative role, but getting experience in a workplace experience is so important. And then, obviously if you can get marketing, but you can turn things into if you're scooping ice cream and you're understanding the sales cycle of ice cream vending, and you're understanding what the marketing is like for your ice cream shop. I mean, things like that don't seem a big deal, you can translate those into very meaningful insights.
Yeah.
And so I just think, I used to when I was interning and I would be filing, and I think, you know what, this could be the dullest job, or I could be learning a lot from the way that this executive organizes her documents. What kind of documents are these? And take every experience as a learning opportunity, and then I would say, start reading and start asking people questions, start reaching out to people, get involved in your local community. There's probably some sort of community professional group that you can get involved in, and send people, don't send people generic LinkedIn, I want to join your network. Don't do that. That's not going to help you one bit. But if you do see something that, you want to ask somebody a question about, and you have intelligent questions and show somebody that you're really interested, then by all means, reach out and show that you've got that drive and that curiosity that employers are always looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't put the onus on the person that you're emailing to don't put it all on them. Give something of value to them, right? Tell them what's in it for them, because people are busy. You probably get pitched all the time. I'm sure you get a lot of emails asking you for stuff, or saying, "Hey, try my thing. It only take 5 minutes." Well, that can take your whole day if you get enough of those requests and everything.
Yes, put yourself in the other person's shoes. I think that's always a good motto as well. And then I would just say, maybe there's something at your local, I would say local college, but usually it can be expensive. And I would say just really start reading, start taking, now that all the AdWords certifications are free, take those a million times.
Yep.
And just start, there's so much you can do to self-study. If I was doing it in 2005, then you're all good to go online in 2016.
Yep.
So, the online is your oyster at this point. So there's tons and tons of opportunities, I would say, to get started.
Yeah, there's no shortage. I think that the biggest thing is the combination of where do you learn and who do you trust. That's a big thing, is like which sources should we use. I think that your publications are a great starting point. That's one of the things that I recommend to everybody who wants to get into this, is read Marketing Land and Search Engine Land, and just sort of get to understand it and get to see how people are writing about the industry and what people are looking at. And then whatever you can do to get hands-on experience as well, like you said, an internship or even an apprenticeship, or something where you're not concerned about compensation, you're concerned about experience, because experience is a greater compensation than anything else out there, in my opinion. It's really what sets you apart and what gives you the future opportunities.
Exactly. And I would also say to that agencies are almost always shorthanded and will be more likely to be open to, if you say, let me put this proposal together for you and I can give you 4 hours. What do you need me to do to get up to speed? Let me come in and, whatever it is, shadow for 2 weeks. I won't be annoying and I will help you. Things like that, just to get hands-on. I think you be creative, and it's not necessarily going to be you sending in a resume and getting a job. It could be, sticking your foot in the door in a way that's going to help them, and you'll get experience and probably some contacts and maybe a job out of that, but probably a footing and something you can take elsewhere.
Great. I think that's a good note to leave our listeners on, and that is to get the foot in the door and do whatever you can with it, but just get that starting point and be clear with where you see things going. I think that in 2005, search was the thing, right? It was the future. Now, I think it's in the present. And so if you're looking for the future, then you might want to look in some of the other things that you write about, like paid social and just paid media in general. I think that's a good place to look. But just see where things are coming along, and even look at your own behaviors. What are you using more now, and what has opportunity for growth? And that's really the cool thing about this industry, is that, as you said, as you started us off saying, marketing is marketing. It doesn't really matter what form it takes. It's really getting people interested in what you have to sell. And so Might be the same for magazines as it was for search, and it might end up being the same for Instagram or Snapchat or Pinterest, any other emerging platform at that point as well.
Right.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's been really fun chatting.
My favorite part of this podcast is hearing the paths that people take to success. Ginny started in paid search in a similar way to our previous guest, Melissa Mackey. She came into her own around the same time as another one of our previous guests, Elizabeth Marston, and then she chose a path that was uniquely hers. Well, when we want to learn paid media, for many of us, our go-to publication is search engine land or marketing land. So for her to be the paid media reporter, the one who breaks all that news, is a pretty big deal. It's obvious that Ginny handles this role really well, and I appreciate her giving us a window into how she gets things done. It just proves that our journey to success is not scripted. It's a product of hard work and working our opportunities. For show notes, visit Jeffalytics.com/Ginny.
Previous experience will surely help you down the line. Find the door and stick your foot. In a few years you will be just fine.